what we see are creators feeling really burnt out and frustrated.
Is it okay to take somebody else's idea, though?
YouTube's getting a bit boring, I find, in some ways. We're trying so hard to compete for success that we're losing all originality.
I think as a creator, it's much more life-giving when you can just show up and be yourself.
I'm guilty of it. I've done it in my own content in the past, and I look back at it now, I'm like, that was not me. And people even said to me, like, you're very different on YouTube. I'm like, that's not a good thing. I don't want that.
This can be a scary place for a creator, being vulnerable. That is when their channels take off.
Hey, welcome to the Video Creators Podcast presented by vidIQ. You know how you put a lot of time and energy into your YouTube channel for not nearly enough growth? Yep, we get it. We are here today to help you change that.
Hello, creators. How are you guys? It's great to see you again here for another Video Creators Podcast episode brought to you by vidIQ, like we do every Monday. We're just hanging out and sharing more advanced growth tips and tactics, next level strategy, growing your business, helping you reach more people and change their lives. I'm hanging out today with two of the YouTube strategists here on the team, Sam and Blake. Guys, how are things going today? Sam, what's new for you?
What's new for me? I'll tell you. I don't think anything's new for me, actually.
You lead a very uneventful life. Nothing's ever new. Just saying.
I live in my data analytics. We talk about YouTube stuff. I'm happy. What more could a guy want?
Blake, what about you? Do you lead a more exciting life than Sam?
I think both Sam and I have pretty boring lives. However, I'm looking forward to hanging out right now, too. I think it's been a day that I just, need some more one-on-one with people and hang out, talk some strategy. So looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, I'm loving that. I have been having a lot of fun lately, just kind of digging into learning new things. I am trying to build a second brain right now. That's the new shiny object in my house. We'll have to talk about that another day.
I was going to say, tell me more. Wow.
We'll have to talk about that another day. Right now, we're going to dig into how other people can help learn how to steal ideas the right way.
Every week, we love to highlight a creator that we work with here at Video Creators. And this week, I sat down with Ivana Chapman, who has a fitness channel. And here's a bit of our conversation about what we spoke about.
So I've had an online coaching business for fitness and fat loss for over 9 years now. And originally, I started YouTube just as a means of lead creation for my business. And that has changed now, but that was the purpose. It was just to get people to my online weight loss coaching and to sell my course as well. So I have an online fat loss course as well. So it was getting people to know, like, and trust me, and then get them over to buy from me.
In terms of, your channel, like, what are some of the obstacles, I guess, you faced along the way of whether it's starting your channel or even now? Like, what are some of the things you're kind of facing with your channel?
So at the beginning, although I always knew my target market really well, like I had an email list, I knew who I was speaking to. I'd been working with these people for a long time because I'd worked in person doing coaching for now it's over 20 years. So, and the online thing had been, almost a decade as well. So I knew those people really, really well. But because I was new to YouTube, I experimented a bit, tried to pick topics that might get me tons of views. And unfortunately, that sent my channel in the wrong direction. So I have one video that is pretty much viral, almost at 1 million views now. But unfortunately, it's not suitable for the people that I really want to be working with and the ones that I want to communicate with. So that kind of has been a struggle because the channel grew a lot, but it grew with the wrong audience. So I've been trying to shift that probably in the last year or so and just get very specific about the people that I'm talking to and making sure that I only discuss things that are relevant to them.
Right. Yeah, I get that. I definitely had that experience with a video on my channel in the past too, where I created something that did extremely well, but I was like, okay, this is not the people that I want at the same time. And the tendency I see for people, I know for you, was to kind of try to follow that trend. Cause like, okay, I want more subscribers, I want more views, but
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I created like 4 or 5 videos that were related to that. So it was the stomach vacuum exercise. So I created a whole bunch of exercises that were similar, stomach vacuum, lying down, and all this kind of following that trend. And it was definitely the wrong thing to do because that topic is just not ideal for my educated, really savvy clientele that I want to work with that are not looking for those fads. They're looking for really practical information.
Right.
So it was getting me entirely the wrong audience.
Right. How did you kind of come to the conclusion like that maybe I should stop focusing on this and focus on my audience more?
Well, it was about a year ago when I started to listen to the Video Creators podcast, and I started shifting my ideas from the SEO based, like let's get people in, like searching for the topic that they really want, to let's really think about what the audience wants and what they need, and how you can solve those problems for them. So just shifting that thought process really helped, because I knew that audience, and I was just like, if I can think about what they really want from me, then I can give them exactly what they want. It might not be viral, but it's going to be a smaller audience of people who really enjoy what I have to say.
Right. Yeah. And how do you kind of feel, I guess, in the direction now going, like being more specific to your audience? How are you kind of feeling about the direction of your channel as a whole?
I mean, it's going really well. Like it is stuff that I love talking about, and I've done similar topics over, but in a different way. And now I'm having a lot more fun with it and telling stories and adding a little bit of comedy in there as well. And the biggest result that I've seen is that I've picked up more clients recently. I had 3 last month, and people who are actually just amazing people who have connected with what I've said, because I've tried to be a little bit more personal and share my experiences. And that, I think, has been the most important outcome.
You know, let's say there's a creator wanting to start YouTube, or is, you know, on their journey and struggling. What is a piece of advice you'd give them, knowing what you know now?
I think the biggest thing is just to be very clear about who you're talking to, and only talk to that person or persons. And in my case, I created 2 avatars, one male and one female, and they were based on clients that I'd had in the past. So I was very specific. I knew where they lived, what kind of things they did. And having that sort of clarity makes your message more interesting to people, because they understand, like, this is for me. This channel is for me. She's saying things that make sense to me and that connect with me. They resonate. So if you have that right from the beginning and you focus on just that and tune out all the noise, then you're going to get the right audience a lot faster.
Ivana, thank you so much for your time. I do appreciate chatting with you. It was a lot of fun getting to know you over the past little while working with us at Video Creators, and I wish you all the best in the future.
Oh, thank you so much. This was great.
One of her biggest takeaways was making her message clear to her audience about who she was speaking to, and how that makes the audience feel like, yes, this message is for me, this channel is for me, and how that clarity really makes your channel stand out and really helps you kind of build that right community. And if you're a creator that's working on figuring out, how do I communicate the value to my audience? How do I figure out who my audience even is? Well, we'd love to help you do that in a one-on-one hour consultation. So if that sounds like a great fit for you, I invite you to go to videocreators.com/consulting to book in a 1-hour session there, and we'd love to talk to you.
A little while back, Colin and Samir from the Colin and Samir show, they actually did a really wonderful podcast interviewing an artist named Austin Kleon. One of the topics that they talked about is something that is near and dear to my heart, and really a lot of creators here on the platform. It's a very common thing that, you know, we see somebody else succeeding, right, guys? And we think, oh, well, I'll just do that thing. So we feel pressure because we see something working for a competitor or working for somebody that we respect, or somebody that, and we want that thing. So we feel a little bit of the pressure to imitate the most successful channels. But this approach really ultimately does a few things. First off, it can really hinder your own growth on your channel. But more importantly, is it really ethical? I think was the biggest question. And I found this topic so interesting. Now, as an artist myself, this is very, very common. You hear all the time that there's no original ideas out there. What do you think is kind of like a growing problem that you're seeing on YouTube today, like maybe versus 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, definitely what you mentioned about people trying to mimic what works. And, you know, what I see a lot of, especially Mr. Beast being one of the biggest focuses on YouTube, people trying to think, okay, how do I be Mr. Beast for my channel? Not only that, but I mean, I've Colin Samiri, exactly in this episode you referenced, talked a bit about Ryan Trahan and some of the problems around people ripping off his content word for word, or script wise, video wise, thumbnails. Even I've seen people take thumbnails and just replace the face completely, but the exact same thumbnail in the background, and it's we're losing all originality. And really, like, these people who have invested all their time and energy into crafting something that's of them and that they're proud to share, we're just taking it and treating it like it's our own. It's worth nothing, and we want to make it work for us instead.
So, Sam, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this as well as being like a growing problem that you see, because you worked with both of you have worked with a lot of different clients, and you guys have watched an insane amount of YouTube as strategists. But
that is true.
Yeah, what's kind of like the problem that you're seeing, or the impact that I think it has on a creator? More importantly,
I think the impact. I think we see that a lot. It's hard not to look at other creators in the same niche as you, or just similar creators out there, and you see their growth and the numbers that only you can see the outside perspective of. I mean, you can only really see the views and subscribers, and I guess comments. But as a viewer of other channels, you can't really see some of the things really going on in the back end and the analytics. And so I think sometimes what we see are creators feeling really burnt out and frustrated, feeling like, why is so-and-so able to, grow and he see these numbers when I'm doing the exact same thing that they're doing and I'm not seeing the same results. So I think we see a lot of frustration.
What do you say to somebody then?
Well, in that case, you gotta be yourself. Like, you gotta put some of the blinders on and look at who you're going after, and be your unique self in the way that you are crafting your value proposition, and kind of the way that you do things is going to be what's going to draw people to you. So I think inspiration is a great thing. I think you can be inspired by other creators and feel filled up by it. Like we say all the time, like the best musicians listen to the most music. I think watching a lot of YouTube and being inspired to go do your thing is great. But I do think there's a fine line somewhere where if it becomes, we just want to be like this person and we're going to copy everything that they're doing, of course you're going to be frustrated if you're not seeing the results that way. So that can quickly become a dangerous territory, I think.
Yeah, I feel like there was something that Blake had said earlier where he was saying that there are some creators that actually copied entire videos, like the entire script even, like, to me, that's stealing an idea, not in the right way, in the complete wrong way. Is it okay to take somebody else's idea though and make it your own? Thoughts?
I think there's ways of doing it that are, pointing a hat towards the person who created it originally. I always say you can take inspiration from it. When we think there's nothing new under the sun really. I even think of when I think of like ChatGPT or not Chat, well, any of the AI tools that are creating art pieces in itself, they're grabbing from all different places. Now there's a lot of controversy around that itself, but when it comes to you as a creator, you can take influence from something, grab that idea, and say, how do I add my own self to it, or how do I combine it with something else to make something that's completely new?
So what do you feel is like the growing problem that we're actually seeing on YouTube today?
Maybe just like a loss of authenticity. I think it's interesting because more and more we're seeing now, like even with kids growing up, when they're asked, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like 10 years ago, it was like, oh, an astronaut, a professional athlete, a firefighter. And now like a YouTuber is like really high on that list. And so I think the more it grows, the more there will be kind of these YouTube idols. And some of the what comes with that territory of people just going just tunnel vision. We just got to copy this channel so we can see the same success. So that's one of the main, I guess, issues as we move forward, and YouTube's only going to get bigger and bigger. That result of maybe just that loss of authenticity. I think too with ChatGPT, I know we're not talking about AI today, but that's like another thing too that I think also bleeds into this as well. It just makes it easier to replicate and just completely copy other creators out there too.
Yeah, I think tying into that, both those facts. I mean, one thing I've noticed when it comes to content that I see a lot of now, just as my own viewing habits, YouTube's getting a bit boring, I find, in some ways, because we're seeing the exact same concepts. We're seeing the exact same personalities. When it comes to ChatGPT, I mean, we're seeing, non-humans creating content, trying to entertain humans. That's just a lot of, we're trying so hard to compete for success that we're losing all originality. That, for a viewer, it can get boring after a while. Like, we're seeing the exact same thing. It's like, cool. I mean, I've seen, someone do a penny challenge, 10 dozen times now in every different way. After one person started it, it's like, cool, I've seen this done. Let's try something. What works for you? What's something different for you, to make it interesting for me again? Because, it gets to a point where it's not as entertaining anymore. And it's, that sort of thing.
Well, I think that's kind of like the key though, right? And I've had these conversations with creators too, because like you've been on the platform, for 10 plus years. After a while, you feel like you've done it all. So what if you even copy some of yourself, but put a new spin on it? Right? What's the new story? What's the new perspective? It doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad idea. Maybe you didn't execute it well the first time. Try it through a different lens, the second time. And the same thing too, like, Ryan Trahan's Penny series was a great example. He did that. It was so original. Nobody had done that. Well, he did it himself, right? It was an idea that had evolved over years, I believe.
Yeah.
And just making it better. But when he finally reached his ultimate idea for the Penny series, all of a sudden, like you said, people literally ripped off the thumbnail, his actual thumbnail, and just replaced themselves on it, which that is stealing. I'm sorry, but I don't think that anybody here is going to disagree with me. Right?
No, it feels icky from my end just looking at it. Like, I've seen these thumbnails that are all the exact same. I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I don't feel like I want to click on your video now because I know exactly what you're trying to do here. It's like, it ruins my click experience.
Well, and there you go. There's loss not just of authenticity, but loss of trust. I don't even know you really in the first place, right? For somebody, when you start seeing random things. But there is something to be said, though, because this is a pattern that I see over and over again on YouTube, where somebody will have a lot of success. And I remember Ryan actually was a catalyst for several different trends over the last couple of years. One was the orange jumpsuit, if I remember correctly. And then all of a sudden, all these creators, they saw what success he was having. It was, I want to say the video was about noise and how it was like the quietest room or the loudest room or something. And he was in like an orange jumpsuit, and like, it was a brilliant thumbnail because the contrast was, this is not a thumbnail episode, but I can't not, right? The contrast was so rich and the blacks were rich and just everything in it was just, honestly, it was a beautiful thumbnail. So a lot of creators were like, wow, look at the success he had with that thumbnail. And they took it and they did their own thing. Now, they didn't necessarily they didn't do the same concept, but they stole the idea of the thumbnail and then put their own spin on it. Right or wrong?
I think at that point, to me, it'd be right. You're taking influence, but you're twisting your experience, like your taste on it. Like in comparison to I'm thinking of thumbnails in my mind that I've seen based on variations of that to me had the same contrast of just like the bright color, the dark background, as opposed to variations I've seen of like Ryan's content, whether him lying in the grass. So it's just like some of those, while they're a bit variations, are pretty much still rip-offs complete at that point.
Yeah, I think there's a point where you can kind of like synthesize what made this a good thumbnail and how could we replicate that. And it's not literally just we're going to copy and paste and just use this as our own, but what made this a good thumbnail and how can we use it is like one thing that I'm thinking. But I know we also talk a lot about connecting known to unknown, and it can actually be powerful to use like a known person or a known thing in your thumbnail. And if you are tweaking it to make it your own and you're still using some of those elements, it can make it more clickable. Like you can definitely use some of those elements to make it a more clickable and better thumbnail, but not just completely copying it.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about now some true authentic creators, because I feel like one of the keys to success on YouTube is really tapping into your authentic self. And I feel like a lot of conversations that we have with creators, especially new creators, there's a little bit of nerves being on camera, even though you feel like you're showing up, but you're truly not your authentic self. Because I always find it interesting, and correct me if you guys have a different experience, but I prep for a consultation. Right? I do. Just for those of you who've never been through a consultation with us, we do a lot of work prior to even showing up that day. We watch a lot of your videos. We look at whatever questions you have. We look at what's going on your channel, and then we put together some thoughts. So I already have a feeling that I know this creator, and a lot of times the person who shows up in the Zoom room is somebody totally different. Not meaning like a different person, but that's their authentic self, not what I'm seeing on YouTube, right? Have you guys experienced that at all?
Yeah,
100%. That's actually happened recently, and I was almost disappointed because the creator that I was working with, understandably, they were really apprehensive about being on camera, and they'd done some voiceover in some past videos, but like they just were very anxious about it. And so when I was talking to them on this call, they were great, like really great personality, super easy to connect with them. And it was almost like, I'm never going to force someone to do something they're not comfortable with, but it was almost like a missed opportunity because it was so pleasant to get to talk with them and just kind of like see their personality. I was like, I just want to see this in your content. Like it's not there. And of course, it's a muscle to build, being on camera and kind of gaining your confidence. And it's not like you just flip a switch and you can just do it immediately. Yeah. Some people can, and I'm jealous of those people, but it was almost a little disappointing because it was like, oh man, like this, I would love for more people to get to see like your true authentic self in your content.
Yeah, and it has happened in the past where at the end of a consultation, because we send the creator the recording of our consults, and I give them homework of watching back the consult because that was their true self, with the assignment of relating that into their content. So who are, in your guys' eyes, who are some of the most authentic, really successful, authentic creators on YouTube? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think one of the ones that come to mind for me, Peter McKinnon, I think is, it's never him trying to be anything. He's just his funny, awkward self sometimes going on there. And it's, it's fun to watch. And he's never tried to mimic anyone. He's just tried to do his own thing. And that's really worked for him. And I think that's why his community is so strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say, we already talked about Ryan Trahan. Gotta talk about Ryan Trahan at some point in every podcast. So I would say him. I think Peter McKinnon is another one that comes to mind for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can say I've met Peter McKinnon in real life, and he is very much just like he is on the videos. There's no difference. Casey Neistat to me feels pretty authentic. I have no doubt that if I were having a conversation with him, that's exactly who would show up. Maybe without the sunglasses.
Yeah.
But who else for you guys? Anybody else?
I've watched a bit of Emma Chamberlain in the past, and I've heard even conversations with Colin Samir talking about her and their podcast as well. And just even heard her thought process behind her content is she's never wanted to be something the same when it comes to YouTube. She just creates her own style. A lot of her content is just her being her. It's a lot of personality driven content on YouTube, but it's done well for her because she's authentic. And I think people resonate with that. They see that she's just being a regular person, doing the same old things, whatever they may be, but she's never afraid of breaking the patterns that you see on YouTube for the sake of doing something new, doing something different, keeping true to herself and keeping authentic.
So do you guys have any practical tips for someone listening that might be in this situation where they're not showing up on camera as their true authentic self?
Yeah, I feel like I would think about, we talk about primal branding a lot. Like, what are some of the things unique to you and the way that you do them? It can be, and I know this isn't a primal branding episode. I could talk about primal branding for a long time because I love talking about it. But, if you think about for your audience that you're trying to reach and your niche, what are maybe some creeds that you have? What are some beliefs you have about the thing that you're talking about? What are some little personality pieces you can integrate into your content? Some of the channels that we're talking about here as authentic creators are really good examples, but they're a little kind of like larger than life creators, these really, really big ones. And some of them, I don't even know if they necessarily fall into like a particular niche. So another creator that comes to mind, if you guys have seen Joshua Weissman, I think is his last name. He's a cooking channel. Yeah. That's a bit more of like a black and white niche. Like, this is a cooking, almost like a how-to educational cooking channel. But I would say he's another good example of totally authentic. He has tons of good primal branding. He's just very much himself. And a lot of the people, including myself, who come back every time and keep watching his content are coming back for him. And then the cooking is there too, which is great. But I think just integrating some of those things, identifying what those are as a creator, and then integrating that into your content, like letting people know you.
I think for some people too, especially when it comes to people who are, who are prepping quite a bit for their content, you can get into presentation mode rather than conversation mode.
Totally.
And that can make you feel robotic sometimes. It can make you feel like you're not being as again, like when I think of even some conversations I've done recently as well too, jumping into a consult with them, you can see how different their demeanor is, different their smile is, they're laughing, like it just feels a lot more natural. And the tendency is when we script something to just read it word for word. So something that could help people is, let's just bullet point something and let it flow a little more naturally. Sometimes it can even help having someone in the room on the other side of the camera and talk to them as you would, as like a practical thing. That way you're not being camera shy, but you're actually having a conversation with somebody. That can also help sometimes too.
Yeah, I agree. And to kind of piggyback on what you just said there, Blake, I feel like, and if you don't have somebody who can be in the room, or you just can't possibly do this in front of another person, really remember who your target audience is. And when you can name that person, and we can't go an episode without talking about target audience, but when you name that person, right, and you can imagine them literally through the camera lens, your voice will almost drop. You'll ground yourself a little bit, and you'll just start to have a conversation with them, imagining them to be on the other side of the camera. And that can be a real powerful thing in kind of unlocking that real you and getting away from, like what Blake said, getting away from presenter mode. Because when you're in presenter mode, it's almost like you're shouting at the camera, right? And so you have to imagine the other person on the other side is the viewer. So that's kind of a hard thing to watch sometimes, or it doesn't flow as easy. Imagine if you just showed up as yourself and you were just having a conversation with your best friend.
Yeah, I think there's a tendency, we think of YouTube as like you're shouting with a megaphone and hoping like all these people, the whole like, hey guys, welcome back guys, sort of language. And it's remembering that every view is a one-on-one experience too, is like that kind of changes the way you approach shooting your content too, because now you're like, oh yeah, I'm just talking to like one person right now. We're just having a conversation. And yeah, there will be many views, but all of them are happening, one-on-one basis.
Yeah, so this kind of piggybacks a little bit with the credibility thing that we were talking about. And when people are copying, it's very much similar to the consequences for copying versus not showing up authentically, right? There's a perceived loss of credibility and trust. Like, what else do you guys feel a viewer might interpret that as?
Definitely trying to be something you're not. Again, it can feel forced. I think, again, Sam mentioned too, like, the typical, everyone thinks you to start off with like a really loud voice. Hi, that's coming back to the idea of copying on YouTube. That's the rhetoric we hear. That's the demeanor we hear. We copy that. And I think people have become a bit numb to that, knowing that you're trying to do it for the sake of YouTube rather than trying to be who you truly are. And when I see somebody, personally myself, on YouTube who just talking, having a conversation, leaving in their awkward stutters, their awkward laughs, it hits differently this time. And now it feels different than what I'm used to seeing, which can kind of even break the patterns of a general viewer who's used to seeing loud screams all the time. And that's what connects with people. That at this point, you don't feel like you're trying to be something you're not, but now you're feeling more like a human and embracing your flaws as a human.
I feel like that's the difference between TV and movies and YouTube, right? Is TVs and movies, everything is like so polished, right? They're truly acting and getting it right. Whereas YouTube is a little more raw, is what I heard.
Yeah, I would add to that too. I think as a creator, it's much more life-giving when you can just show up and be yourself versus trying to copy someone else. It's just exhausting.
It's draining. It's draining.
Yeah, it's so draining.
I'm guilty of it. I've done it in my own content in the past, and I look back at it now. I'm like, that was not me. And people even said to me, like, you're very different on YouTube. I'm like, that's not a good thing. I don't want that. That's telling me that I'm doing something wrong, that I need to kind of take a step back and be more who I am.
Yeah. If it helps the podience listening, yes, we said podience. That was where we landed. So many of us creators have been there. We totally understand. But one of the things that you may want to consider if you're not quite there yet are the real consequences to not stepping into your true self and also copying somebody else. What have you guys seen with creators that you've worked with?
Well, I think that channel I was talking a bit about earlier, they were a really good example of, like, I think there's a difference between I'm not comfortable on camera just yet and I'm getting reps and just kind of going for it. And it doesn't feel super natural, but like I'm putting myself out there and growing the muscle. On the other side of the spectrum, when it's just, I'm kind of in presenter mode and I'm just pretending to be somebody that I'm not, I think there's some real consequences there. So for the prior example of, I'm just going to try to get comfortable and do this thing, I think that's a really great place to be. That, for this particular creator that I was working with, the first couple videos that they did, it felt a little uncomfortable, but just after a few, they were able to see, like, oh wow, like this is actually, I'm seeing myself get better time after time. And in their words, they said, this is so much more life-giving now that I'm doing it this way versus just trying to like read a script and teach, or, be somebody that I'm not.
Yeah. And I feel like when creators really dive into, and this can be a scary place for a creator, being vulnerable. Now, vulnerable, what does that look like to you guys when somebody's vulnerable? Define that for the audience.
Oh, I think it's... Go ahead, Sam. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll take the first swing. I would say when you can relate to the person on the other side of the screen, it doesn't have to mean they're like sharing their deepest, darkest secrets ever. But if there's a moment where they can just be real and share a moment of realness, where they're being raw in whatever topic that they're talking about, having that moment with sharing it with us, the viewer, those are moments of vulnerability that I see.
Yep. I think embracing your flaws is another one too. I know for me personally, if I were to be vulnerable now, like I find if I get too excited or my brain goes too fast, I'll stutter over my words. And one thing I started doing in my own content was like, I'm going to leave that in there and I'll sometimes draw emphasis to it for fun, but like letting people know like, hey, I stumble on my words too. It's something I don't necessarily love, but it's who I am. It's part of, my make as a person. Right. So even when it comes to you dropping something or you mess up your words in a video, like keeping those things in there, embracing those flaws, that immediately pulls you out of like, I'm watching a movie into like, oh yeah, this is a person.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of times people think when they hear the word vulnerability, they think, oh my gosh, I have to cry now, or I have to, there has to be this big drama or this thing that I have to open up on camera for. And it doesn't have to look like that. And that's the thing, is not everything looks a certain way, right? Being vulnerable just means being honest and being raw. And maybe you're talking about, you have an opinion that's maybe the opposite of what a lot of people feel, but it's important to you. And being open and being vulnerable about it and being honest to the viewer, that's powerful. And what else is it beyond that? It's original. Right? Because this is you. This isn't necessarily copying somebody else. So let's talk a little bit now about what are some of the things that we can learn from bigger creators without like mimicking them 100%.
There's a book called Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. Yeah, definitely a really great read for any of you. When it comes talking around the concept of how do I, again, nothing's new under the sun, but how do I learn from somebody else and embrace that? And one thing they talk about is, start by imitating your heroes, finish by emulating them. Learning from what they're doing, and you can imitate them, but when it comes to the actual presentation, emulate them in a way that's of you, but with the elements that you've learned. So embracing that influence is kind of what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people that I have taught over the years in art ask me permission to copy what I'm doing. And I always tell people, if you're doing it for yourself because you want to learn a skill, go for it. Copy it to a T. But then when you go to do something and you want to create on your own and you're going to sell, or you want to create a piece of content, learn what you got from that and make it your own, right? Mm-hmm. Do your own thing.
Gosh, you can learn so many skills that way too. Absolutely. I've done some art in the past too, and I've learned how to draw certain things by mimicking people's artwork and seeing the way they thought about drawing this piece just through me trying to copy that. And then helped me in future pieces figure out how, okay, now knowing what I've learned from this, I can apply it to this new art piece. Same with editing styles, same with, film angles, any of those sorts of things. You learn by copying that, but it sticks and applies into your tool belt that you can apply to other pieces of content as well. Yeah.
What else, guys?
Yeah, maybe this might be more of kind of the same, but I think just that idea of inspiration. I think, it's not, I don't want someone listening today to walk away thinking like, I can't take some of the ideas that I'm seeing from the creators that I really like and use them because it's bad. Like, I think inspiration is so important. Like, for everything we're talking about, I think it's really healthy and encouraged to have some of your favorite YouTube channels and your favorite creators that you watch and to be inspired by them, and then let that fuel you up to, maybe we learn how to do what they're doing, kind of what we're talking about, and then how do we take our own unique spin when we're approaching our content. That can be really great, and that can really kind of fuel you as you're making your own videos as well.
Yeah, and I feel like there's so many things that you can steal and truly steal in the right way. It doesn't necessarily have to be an identical thing that somebody's doing, but, maybe like you guys were kind of talking about, maybe it's how somebody presents their hook. That's not really stealing anything. That's just looking at a technique. How can you take that and just adapt it with your content? Maybe what else would you guys think of?
I think even the idea of when it comes to, again, learning from other people, pick multiple. Steal from many rather than steal from one. And then you can combine those ideas to kind of create something different. I've done this in the past when I've done just design aspects. I've looked up various different pieces of inspiration, whether it's been on Google, wherever that may be, and I'll keep those and say, okay, based on these 4 or 5 things, how can I combine this to create something that's going to be brand new? the same goes for creators as a whole, videos specifically. What can you pull from those to kind of create something brand new?
Yeah, and I feel like being a student is really a smart thing to be a student of people who have really learned things and done it and gotten the success. Be a student of a lot of the things that they're doing, but really find your voice. This is really more about collecting ideas, right? Keeping a journal, writing these things down. Maybe it's a screen grab, maybe it's things that you relate to, things you connect to. But then how do you embrace your own authenticity with that? Got any things that you might suggest to a creator on that?
Well, I would try to define like what are the things you're really passionate about with your like why you're doing your channel in the first place. I would try to think about some of those things. Like what are the things that really excite you and how can we explore that more? That can take form in a lot of different ways. If it's, oh, I love this part about my channel and what I'm doing here, then maybe try to find some other channels that similarly inspire you with that particular thing. And then, like identifying that thing in the first place, I think can go a long way, because the more you do that thing that kind of makes you feel alive, it's just going to make the whole process a lot more fulfilling and I think a lot more fun too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think also as well, what you mentioned earlier, Sam, and I tell people a lot of this as well too in consultations, put the blinders on and focus on your channel and think about, okay, how can I better my content, better my quality, better the value, rather than being paranoid about what everyone else is doing around me, trying to think, okay, well, they're doing this or they're doing that, or they're going faster than me, really focusing on yourself. That takes the pressure off you, first of all. But then you can clearly think about, okay, knowing my audience, knowing my content, what do I need to improve to better serve them? And that's going to be more beneficial for you in the long run and really be a lot easier for you mentally to kind of carry the weight of your channel.
Yeah, and I've seen this over and over again with clients, is when they do truly put blinders on and stay focused on their voice, their passion, and step into their true authentic self and just start creating from a real creative place, like tapping into their beliefs, tapping into the things that mean the most for them. When they show up and they create content like that and do it over and over again, even if it's in a little spurt, that is when their channels take off. I've seen it numerous times. And when they get very frustrated and we start to really evaluate the content, you can kind of see things being emulated. And 9 times out of 10, they will all say, well, I've been watching this and I've been watching that. And I'm like, okay, so the blinders came off a little, right? So we started to not look this way and just think about what we're doing for our viewer and our audience. We started to let all the influences come in. It will affect your channel for sure. Anything else that you have to offer a listener today on how to truly embrace authenticity?
I think maybe as more of a reminder, just it doesn't happen overnight. I think, I think it's easy to just expect things to be the same level or the same quality as some of the creators that you're looking at for inspiration. And that, I know if that's happened for me, that can breed frustration in like, oh, well, theirs is this so much better than mine. And I can't, like, it's just tomorrow, it's not happening kind of a thing. And it's just, being persistent and continuing to just make it 1% better every time. I think that idea of putting the blinders on and kind of competing against yourself too, when it comes to like actually putting out the final product and putting your content out, continuing to just look long-term, look ahead and just keep growing. Like, I think that advice you gave, Ingrid, as far as just being a student, I think is really great. Cause I think as long as you're a student kind of ongoing, like long term, it's going to be a lot more fulfilling as well.
Yeah.
I think even embracing your limitations as well too. Again, thinking of people trying to emulate Mr. Beast and thinking, okay, I need to have all this money, these crazy challenges. There's something incredibly cool about not being able to do those at the same time and know, okay, with what I have right now, what can I create? Okay, I don't have $1 million to give away. What can I do that's fun? Again, Ryan Trahan, Mr. Beast, two different people, two different extremes. Like Ryan Trahan shows that you can do something. Peter McKinnon, same idea. Casey Neistat. It can be the simplest things with not much involved, and it can still be a great piece of content. And you don't have to think about, I need to have all this crazy camera gear, all this money, all these people. It's embrace what you have and think about, okay, with what I have, seeing what I want to try to emulate, how can I create that with the best I can with what I have?
And that's a really good point, because honestly, the Penny series, I know we've talked about this a lot on this channel, but it was truly one of the most creative things to come out of YouTube in the last several years. Mm-hmm. And he did exactly that, Blake. He put extreme limitations or constraints on resources, equipment, and he truly challenged himself to do something innovative because he wanted to create a gift for his audience. Right? This is true authenticity here. So what does that look like for you listening? You know, it's crucial to remember success on YouTube is going to come if you remember to be yourself. You're the only person that can do you. You got to embrace inspiration, and you have to put your own twist on things. That is really how to create genuinely great content that will attract your tribe. It will attract a loyal following. Focus on your passions. Be persistent. Compete with yourself, not with others around you. You can find the success that you're looking for and make a positive impact on this platform and this earth. Authenticity is going to be the key to standing out and making a difference. You totally have this.
Every week, we'd love to leave all of you with a power tip with something new that YouTube's doing or strategy, whatever that may be. And this week, we want to talk a bit about shorts. And YouTube is adding a feature to shorts. We can now finally scrub through and move around shorts. You want to repeat something, you want to watch something, you want to go back without having to wait the entire minute, you can now do so, which is super awesome. Keep in mind, though, this is for content that is 30 seconds and longer. If you want to scrub around on shorter content than a short, which is kind of fun to think about, tap the screen, pause the short for content under 30 seconds, and that scrubber will appear, and you can do the same as well for that also. But this is really exciting. Also, we'd love to hear from all of you as creators out there. Whatever questions you have around YouTube, strategy, whatever it may be, we'd love to help you answer those questions. So feel free to go to speakpipe.com/video creators and ask your questions there, and we'd love to feature them on a podcast. Thanks for watching another Video Creators podcast. We'll see you next week. Bye.